morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, April 15th, 2021. Time is 9:02 a.m. This is the weekly meeting of our Community Development Organization. Attending for the Board of County Commissioners, Leslie Duncan, Bill Brooks, and of course myself, Chris Filios. And we will call on Pat Braden, please, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I don't have any opening remarks since there's only one item. Excuse me, potential conflicts of interest. I don't know where they'd weigh in here. Changes to the agenda? None. And of course, we have no deliberations this morning. We have one single item, and an important one at that, which is a community development update. And it's the overview of the growth management white paper as prepared by our community development group. So I'll turn it over to Director Callahan. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Some time ago, you'll recall, we discussed at one of these meetings your and our concerns about growth. I offered up that we could do a white paper purely as an informational piece. And so that's what we have done. We really just tried to outline the things we know from experience, personal and otherwise, have worked in other communities. And we also included the two seminal cases that actually started growth management in this country, so you would at least have an understanding of how things have evolved and that the courts have supported these things over time. It's fair to say that most municipalities these days model their attempts at growth management after Petaluma and Ramapo to some degree, because they know that it'll withstand challenge if that needs to go there. I really hadn't planned on going into any of the details because I thought it'd be better to just have a dialogue. Mm-hmm. If you have questions or suggestions, want more information, and the other thing, just to open things up for discussion, I'm reminded of the reason I thought of the growth paper. I had an instructor professor at Texas Tech, MIT graduate. He was often reminding me that it's hard to make a decision in a vacuum. Ever since then, I have tried to provide information and be knowledgeable of what's up, because it does work out better if you know more. So that was really the starting point for this. I hope it's useful, but that's all I had in case, I'll just open up now in case you have comments or want to go further with it.
Questions? Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, make sure we're
Talking about the conservation cluster designs, it says near the bottom of page 8, requiring conservation cluster designs for all major subdivisions could help. So I guess I would want to know, I mean, if you had a subdivision of 300 acres and they want 20-acre parcels, why would we require them to cluster?
You would only go this way as a board, and presumably with community support, with the notion and belief that it's better to consolidate lots into a tighter squeeze so they wouldn't be 20 acres. They'd be smaller lots. With the notion that a development is better if you trade off open space for condensing lots next to infrastructure. It's an ideological viewpoint. So, you don't have to go there, but that's...
Well, I was just going to say another thing you could do if you didn't want to require that is you could, one, you could require in certain circumstances, not in others, and two, you could, incentivize.
Yeah.
We had, the incentive of bonus density in the past.
It didn't get used much.
Right.
And that's why we took it out.
And it wasn't politically popular either at the time.
But there are other incentives we could offer besides
Right.
just density.
Right.
So I guess the real question is to you is, do you think this sort of thing resonates with the community or not? Would it be useful? Is it something to discuss? I'll be talking to the pachyderms tomorrow. I plan to bring it up and say,
Kind of,
what do you think?
oh, sorry, Dave. And as an aside too, there, in, my reading of it and editing, I recognize there were things, that were in this white paper that probably would not be politically popular necessarily, at least right now, but we wanted to put as many options on the table as possible as well.
Sure. I think this is a definite worthwhile conversation to have with the public, for sure, to see where they feel like they want to go. Can we talk about the TDRs, the
Sure.
transfers of development rights?
That's the next page.
Yeah. So just to make sure that I understand it right, you have this land, but you also have this land, and this person pays this person not to develop so they can develop. Is that,
Yeah, that's it in a
That's it.
nutshell.
wow,
And the logic behind it is that in our case, you, the board, and the plan commission would work through what are the lands that we ought to preserve. That's tough,
right,
but it's doable. I worked
Okay.
for a place for 12 years that had done it.
Okay.
And, it takes years, literally, to go through all that. But once you do and you get political agreement, then you send the rights to development off of the areas you want to preserve to somewhere where you think they ought to land.
okay,
And in our area, that may, could involve coordination with our cities as well, potentially, if they were willing to consider something like that. That was the example that, from King County in Washington, that,
Right.
sometimes it makes more sense to develop more densely in downtown Seattle than in some of the very rural areas of that county.
right, so it talked about the ability to go up, so
Right.
they bought their ability to
Right.
expand,
And
okay.
of course, the cities would have to be on board with that,
Right,
but it's
exactly.
entirely doable.
So I imagine you could use this, for example, as obviously a planning tool, but you might say, okay, look, we have a situation here where we have a wildlife corridor, and maybe it's crucial that we protect it, so somebody owning that land potentially sells off the development rights.
That's a good example.
Okay. It's one, but it's, okay.
Right.
Right. And then we are actually working on our areas of city impact currently, right?
Well,
We just got done with redoing the
One.
Hauser
Hauser.
ACI.
Yeah.
and that was
We haven't
fabulous.
formally started, negotiation or even, giving notice that we want to negotiate them, but I think that's probably the logical next step, especially with the coordinated ACI, since it's been, over a decade and a half, and conditions have changed considerably in that area. And, part of it, kind of finding out whether the three cities involved want to still have a coordinated ACI or if they want their own.
There is an opportunity with this group that Chris and I are part of, and Kiki Miller and all the planners in the area that are talking about growth management countywide. I think we could bring up the notion next meeting of a master ACI that would include as many cities as we can get, because the kind of thing we're discussing really only works if we pull all this together.
Right.
Or, well, better said, works best. Because it's painful to go to each city and.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I will tell you from experience, it takes a lot more time to negotiate with 4 groups than one. But once you do, you're done. Once one and done, and then everything works better.
Can you just briefly, and I think it's related to, well, it's obviously related to the white paper, but maybe specifically to this, excuse me, the situation that you encountered in Boulder?
Wow, there's where to start. Maybe a little history. We mentioned in here that what happened in Boulder took decades. You know, it started in the 70s. It wasn't until 90-something that they actually implemented an open space tax. It took them that long to get the citizenry involved sufficiently to buy into it. But once they did, both the city and the county had a war chest to buy land. And that's today, to me, the magic of it is when I left, they had a mere 50,000 acres in open space that they were leasing back to farmers or had bought as conservation easements, so the original owners still owned it, but they'd bought off the development rights. So that's why if you go to visit there today, you see that there's a lot of open space between the cities. But the other cool thing that happened with that open space program is over time, it's amassed 1,000 acres. You know, I was there with 50,000. Today, it's 1,000.
You mean,
I was, I mean, 100,000,
Okay.
pardon me, brain slip. I'm getting old. Yes, 100,000. So, you know, that's serious land acquisition.
Yeah.
And of course, Boulder, like here, is a big county. But set that aside for a moment. Two other things that worked hand in glove with that open space program is Boulder had intergovernmental agreements with all its cities. Growth was contained within a certain limit on all of those cities. And then the way that worked was as part of those IGAs, the county commissioners had worked through a TDR program where they were sending development rights to all of those cities because they'd all agreed to accept them. And they're still, to my knowledge, they're still doing that today. That's still part of their program. So it was a multifaceted approach. I dare say that if any one of those things had not come together, you know, the moon and stars, it probably wouldn't worked as well as it did. And it took a lot of pushing by the then county commissioners to get the cities to come to the table, to talk, to dialogue. I remember our lead county attorney there was instrumental, a guy named Hoyt, in pulling all this together. He literally wrote the IGAs for all of these cities and then the master IGA. And he and the commissioners were so involved in this lockstep over the years. That's what the kind of thing that made it happen. So, you know, it really was a political will, a political decision, but it, you know, built up over time because it started back in the 70s. And it's fair to say today that the community is so immersed in it and bought into it to such a degree that they wouldn't have it any other way.
during this process, was there much resistance from the real estate community?
I can't say. I was only there 12 years, and, you know, it went on for a long time. By the time I got there, people had bought into it. It was understood. It was, so no. But I don't know about early on.
Did it have the effect of inflating prices?
There was that argument. We brought in specialists that said that it didn't, that the market was the market anyway, regardless of this. But, you know, that's still debatable.
Right.
Everyone wonders about these things and how it affects the marketplace. I don't know that there's a definitive answer.
You know, I think a big part of it would be how it's set up. You know, what lands are preserved and how, you know, valuable and desirable they are versus, you know, where the development rights were transferred, presumably into one or more of the cities. You know, it could, you know, actually provide more opportunity to, you know, purchase a home potentially in a more desirable area. You know, it may not have an effect. It could have an effect, but not necessarily a major one.
And it's hard to imagine that it's more so than what we have right now today, where real estate prices are more than double what they were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Well, and the thing, too, is that it's a different design approach because as you do something like that, but at the same time zoning for smaller lots within the ACI, you're actually, while you're removing land potentially from development, you're also, if you go to a cluster design or smaller lot sizes, now you're increasing the density,
increasing it.
so you're increasing supply.
And presumably where it makes sense to do it, because there's the infrastructure in
Yes.
place to take care of it.
Yes. Okay.
I think definitely having the conversation, excuse me, with all the cities at once, I think is
Yeah.
important, because I think everybody needs to know, we have an opportunity to be San Francisco. We can go demolish half of Coeur d'Alene and build high-rise apartment buildings, or we can say, this is who we are, and
Right.
this is how we're staying.
This is what we'd like to be.
This is
Obviously,
what
you
we'd
know,
like to be.
Yeah, I can't see, a program like this being like, Boulder County or the Bay Area in California. I mean, our political climate is far different.
Right.
And so, but some of the, same or similar tools, I think, can be used to incentivize certain things and, maybe guide them instead of, you know, government kind of, shrinking the market or whatever. We could just, allow the market to work in such a way as to, produce a desirable result.
David, a lot of people, I think all commissioners, but speaking for myself, have a lot of people asking, we're growing like crazy. Can't we just stop it? Can't we just declare a moratorium? Can't we just stop the development? And it's a very simplistic question, but it's an extremely complex answer. And I think the more people avail themselves of reading your paper, if they really read it, honestly, first blush, they'll be confused. Because people don't know what all these terms are. But when you really sit down and take it apart and talk to somebody like you who knows, then it starts to make sense. And we have options.
Well, that's part of why I'm hoping to do the road show with this, with everyone that wants to listen, is because this makes everything easier.
Excellent.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, or, in that, there are also constraints in Idaho law that help, ensure that we don't go too far with this, both in terms of, revenue sources and, what we can do with, areas of city impact and that kind of thing. So, this would be an Idaho solution as opposed to some other states.
Well, it has to be, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, but I
and a
just,
Kootenai County solution.
right.
To be that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think too that it's just an important conversation to have, because you go to places like Brentwood, California, that's what they are. There's no people complaining, let us in, let us in. That's what we are. So you can either afford it or not afford it, and you can wait till something comes on the market or whatever. So I think that broader conversation with the community, with all the cities, to say, what do you want to look like? What do you want to be? And to Pat's point, I think we probably have an idea of what that answer is for probably 80% of the people. We want it to stay the way it is. We don't want to keep demolishing for, 10-story apartment buildings. So the problem is getting those developers to hear what the community wants, because build it, they will come. Yeah, the community doesn't want it, but people will still come because it's available.
I'm just kind of wondering what the balance of, you mentioned the comments about people wanting to rein in growth, but I'm wondering what the balance is between those comments and people that still, are still concerned about property rights.
Well, I think that some of these options here, buying development rights from people, I think is a good, because I honestly think that some of the people find themselves in a situation where I can't be on my land anymore. I need to move to town, or I need to move with family out of state. And then the dollar signs come, and these developers offer, fantastic
hard not to.
rates.
Yeah,
It's-
I mean, that would be something that would be, an
Right.
exercise of property rights instead of a limitation on it,
Right.
which is a cool thing too.
Yeah. And, us, the cities and the county being involved in securing open space, I think is really important too.
And especially where you have generations that have farmed the land and are now confronted with that decision and really do not want to see it developed.
Yeah.
And this is where, you know, the transfer of rights might come in.
Or the open space program, because you are paying them what their land is
Yeah,
currently worth,
right.
which
Yeah.
includes the market value,
And they
Yep.
can continue to
and
work.
then lease it back to them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
True.
there's lots of options.
And the interesting thing is if the options are left to the individuals, where government simply provides the opportunity, you really kind of have a partnership between the public and the private sectors at that point. When I say private, I mean individuals.
Individuals.
You know, as opposed to government dictating, so to speak. So I see these options as just that, options, which is precisely, I think, what you were trying to achieve. And in that regard, I think it's a good job.
I want to brag on the staff for a moment. Everyone you see on the front page did this beyond their regular duties. And I dare say you can tell from the reading of it that they had a sincere interest. Planners get to do what they love most, which is provide you with good information.
Good information.
There are a couple things in here that I can see really not being acceptable.
Right.
But,
Yeah, and that goes back to my comment earlier, which is to
Yeah.
maximize the options, even ones we recognize are not going to be.
right, but let's hear from them. And you tell us, okay, these are not options that we're willing to consider as cities, as citizens. And then we can say, okay, so now we've
good to
got.
know.
Yeah, exactly. So now instead of 5 tools, we can use 3 tools that we all agree on, so.
And really what it comes down to is what quality of life do we want? Ultimately, that's the decision, consciously or subconsciously, that we're all making. And, but to your earlier question, Pat, there is a thread, a Facebook thread called Responsible North Idaho Growth. If you get on that, and you're going to hear a wide range, and some of them are
Oh, sure.
off the wall, some are,
Well, it is Facebook.
yeah. It's folks really not understanding what the limitations are, and they'll call for certain things, not realizing that it's just not going to happen here, or state law precludes it, one or the other, but you'll get a picture of what people are saying. And I don't know how many folks are, I think they've got at least 1,300 people, if I'm not mistaken. But that's one view. But I think it's, you know, these are issues, these are questions and options that we have to confront. I can tell you that, well, I don't have to tell you, you've probably seen it for yourselves, but if you're conducting business and you have to travel, when I say travel, within the county during work hours, it's probably taking twice as long as it did even just 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's true.
The
Statistically
traffic,
true.
yeah, and
Right.
the infrastructure simply is not keeping up. And so this is timely. Overdue, but timely.
It's actually overdue.
Yeah,
Because if it's gonna take us 20 years,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much property we're gonna have to deal with
right.
in 20 years. But I think that everybody's ripe for the conversation.
It's one of those, to me, one of those things that there's no perfect time to begin this sort of thing. If you look back at the politics of this community in the past, this wouldn't have even been on the table. So I think we have to go with what we have, and we can at least now have the discussion.
Yeah. So you indicated, okay, so there's no action item here. Okay,
Right.
fine. It's a discussion item.
But tell me if there's anything else you want us to do.
Probably just start the conversation.
Yeah, what are your plans to do that?
Well, next
Joe's-
time you and I are at that regional meeting, I'm going to bring this up, that we discuss this. that-
Okay.
And we're going to discuss with the planning commission, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I was invited 2 weeks ago tomorrow to speak on the question of growth, which I did at the Rotary Club. And I used some of the elements from here as well as some of the stats that we have regarding growth, David's building permits, taxes, it's all really encompassed within growth. You're speaking tomorrow at Pachyderm.
Right. Yeah, I'm just going to wing it and bring this with me.
Okay.
But for our NIBCA presentation, were you going to use the same Rotary thing, you think? Or what were you going to do?
excuse me, I wasn't planning a formal presentation.
okay. We'll just
I was
talk.
under the, yeah, I was under the impression they
Yeah.
wanted to ask questions, kind of a
Fine
thing,
by
keep it
me.
informal, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to be prepared.
Now, are you planning, now, I will include some of this
Sure,
in the state of the county.
sure.
So are you actually planning to make stops around the county? Essentially a road show?
Yes, I just haven't actually scheduled them. yet.
Okay, all right.
Now, would this coincide with meeting with cities, or would you meet with cities first and then?
Interesting.
Well, that's good. We need a strategy. I think cities first,
Yeah.
yeah. Because if I get a sense from mayors and council that we can go there or we can't, that's huge.
Well, there's already so much development that's been approved that maybe they can breathe a little bit to say, okay, we've got all this development coming, so maybe we can kind of step back a little bit and start looking at other options.
When you're doing 9.5% growth like Post Falls is, you would think they have enough in the mill to last them a while.
They
Yeah,
actually just denied a subdivision.
did. Yep.
Along, that would have been along Prairie.
Oh, that
And
was
Rathdrum
at,
did too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember
Tillamook.
that too.
yeah.
Tullamore, excuse me, Tullamore.
Yeah, it would have been part of Tullamore.
Yep. Okay. Anything else for David?
Well, thanks for your ear.
Good job.
Oh, thank you.
Good job,
I'll pass
and
it
a
on.
way to open the conversation.
Mary, did you have anything to add?
Nancy, anyone on?
Yeah, Mary Shaw's.
Just Mary?
Oh.
Public comment? I guess not. 9:30, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.